sequence in maths is a set of numbers in a particular order, and each of those numbers is called a term of the sequence. And we use subscripts to identify the terms in the sequence. So we might use U1 with a subscript for the first term, U2 for the second term, and a general nth term would be called UN. There are two ways of specifying a sequence. You could give a formula for the nth term. So, for example, UN is 4n plus 1. So starting with n is 1, that's 4 times 1 plus 1, then 4 times 2 plus 1, and so on. Here's another example. UN is 1 over 4n plus 1. So when n is 1, it's 1 over 4 ones plus 1. The numbers are the reciprocals of the numbers we had in the first sequence. Here's another example. UN is 6 times negative 1 to the power n. So when n is 1, it's 6 times negative 1 to the power 1. And the next term is 6 times negative 1 to the power 2. And there's the sequence. Another way of specifying a sequence is giving the first term and then giving a formula for the next term. So giving a formula for the n plus 1th term as a function of the nth term. A formula like this is called a recurrence relation. So in the first example, our first term is 2, and to get the next term, you have 3 times the one you've just had plus 1. 3 2's are 6, plus another 1 makes 7. To get the next term, 3 7's are 21, plus another 1 makes 22. We don't always use U, U1, U2, U3. Sometimes we use T for term, and A is another letter that's very often used. In this example, the next term is found by squaring the previous one. 10 squared is 100. 100 squared is 10,000. In example C, the next term is the negative of the one just before it. The negative of 3 is minus 3, and the negative of that is 3. A decreasing sequence is one in which each term is smaller than the one before, and an increasing sequence is one in which each term is bigger than the one before. Example 1 gives an example of a decreasing sequence. As n gets bigger and bigger, 3n plus 1 gets bigger, and 1 over 3n plus 1 gets smaller. Un equals 2 to the n is an example of an increasing sequence. 2, 4, 8, and so on. A sequence is described as periodic if the terms repeat in a cycle, and the number of terms in each cycle is called the period, or the order of the sequence. So for a periodic sequence, for any number n, un plus k is going to be the same as un, the one in the previous period. So here's an example. U1 is 3, and the next term is always found as the reciprocal of the one we've just had. So it goes 3, a third, 3, a third. And each pattern is only 2 terms long, so this one's a periodic sequence of order 2. The next one, if we have un is the sine of 90n degrees, so if n is 1, that's the sine of 90 degrees. And then we have the sine of 180 degrees, the sine of 270 degrees. And the pattern repeats. And this one's a periodic sequence of order 4, because you have to have 4 numbers, 4 terms, before the sequence repeats. Here's a less obvious one. For this one, you're told the first 2 terms. And then the next term is found by the one you've just had divided by the one before that. Think about this one. So we've got 2, 6. The next one would be 6 over 2. And then we'd have 3 over 6, and then half divided by 3, and then you'll see eventually we get back to 2 and the pattern repeats. So this one is a periodic sequence of order 6.